Yaël Ossowski, of course, so willing to adapt and adjust with the times, which is why we welcome our friends from the Consumer Choice Center to our airwaves on a Thursday in the prime time slot, Yaël. 8 a.m. You better make the commentary good because we've got more ears than ever tuned in to you today. And I guess we should welcome you in with this tune because obviously yesterday you were giving a little testimony to what we would call the General Assembly of France. And what were you talking about?
Oh, we were talking about cannabis, Joe. The Holy Leaf.
Yaël hanging with Bone Thugs yesterday, the Weed Man.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other people who actually have that moniker better than me, but definitely was fun to contribute to the policy conversations. France is in talks to try to legalize cannabis, and we're really trying to push them and advocate for consumer-friendly policies, market-friendly policies. I think it was fun, and definitely they loved to hear my French-Canadian accent, and I think we had a good time with the Frenchies.
So tell me, when we talk about consumer-friendly policies here, of course, many staunchly conservative tuned into the program here this morning who are, hell-bent against any type of legalization of drugs, cannabis being one of those drugs, maybe not going as far as the state of Washington, where we've decriminalized pretty much every illicit substance known to man. We're talking about weed, marijuana, the Swedish Chiba. Give us a little info as to what a consumer-friendly policy would look like in the country of Yaël if, in fact, cannabis were fruitful and plentiful.
Yeah, and Yaelistan is a very free place, Freedomville, we call it. But when it comes down to smart cannabis policy, a lot of it is actually already in place for so many other products that we know. For alcohol, definitely we see that for a lot of different innovative new products that are coming out onto the market, like CBD, which is a variant of cannabis. It does not contain THC, which is the actual part that will give you that intoxicating feeling. So all we're trying to do in advocating is to say, look, we want a smart policy that allows entrepreneurship. So that's actually allow businesses to rise up. Because in many areas where cannabis is already legal in places like Canada or Uruguay, it's state monopolies. It's essentially the North Carolina, ABC store for your cannabis, and we're just trying to avoid that. I think the arguments for making cannabis something that will be treated more as just a normal product, and those who might be addicted or might have problems as mental health problems, I think is necessary. I have many friends who are in law enforcement, both in North and South Carolina, and when 60% of what they're dealing with on a daily basis has to do with just cannabis possession and nothing else, that detracts from their job. It means they can't attend to other calls. People are less safe. Our kind of position for the last couple of years, and we've made this point in various countries now, in various U.S. states, is look, let's just have smart policies that allow a market to exist. We can get rid of the black market. We can get rid of the mafiosos of your day, Joe, or the cartels from Mexico who have controlled a lot of this trade over the last couple of years. So allow entrepreneurship, allow to have good amount of safety and security measures that we believe entrepreneurs can put into place. So there's a lot of differences definitely between states. I don't know about North Carolina. I've been pushing North Carolina for some time. It might take a while, but you never know. We do need money every now and then. So
we don't even have, we don't even have medical, right? Medical marijuana.
No medical, and you barely have the ability to buy your own booze at the store, guys. So believe me, there are many things that we're trying to change when it comes to consumer choice in North Carolina and beyond.
You want to start an insurrection, Yaël? That's a popular word today and yesterday. You want to start an insurrection? Yeah, cut off the booze. You want to see?
Well,
ABC
we'll have Whiskey Rebellion Part 2. If we're repeating history so much lately, we might as well jump on that bandwagon too. 1700s.
I'm not going to lie, Yaël, south of the border, as you cross, the state line into South Carolina, I was seriously entertaining. In fact, I did buy a case of beer on my way back from the freedom-loving state of Florida on New Year's Eve because I didn't know if you could purchase one after the curfew was in effect here in our state. So I got one last taste of freedom. before coming to North Carolina, had to buy that case of beer at south of the border. In fact, if you look up the history of south of the border and why it was in fact created, it was created just for that reason. So people in North Carolina could go get their grandpa's hooch before coming back to across the state line because of the prohibition days, I believe. No, or something around that. Some talk about that. I believe that was the purpose of that landmark on I-95.
Well, yes, and it's very similar to out near the Charlotte area. You know, you take in 77, people go to South Carolina, they got cheaper gas, you can buy fireworks. I mean, this is what nice little state boundaries give us, is that ability to choose. And when we live close enough to that, we can actually get around some ridiculous laws that might exist in our area. So I love that, and specifically North Carolina, South Carolina. Big differences in some ways. Some things are very similar, but I definitely love hopping back and forth. And I know you might disagree, Joe, but I think South Carolina has one of the most beautiful flags in the Union.
And well, with that said, as and just one last little tidbit on this discussion surrounding the legalization of marijuana and all that goes alongside it. In many states and around the world, in talking with many military veterans, there have been even more and further studies and research with the administering of different sorts of illicit drugs, of course, under a controlled atmosphere at the hest of a medical doctor. But talking about psychedelics and ketamine as being, in proper doses, of course, as a way to, well, of course, allow people's guards to go down a little bit. And the doctor, the psychiatrist, and this is, I guess, a dangerous practice, maybe if it gets in the hands of an evil person, but it can help open portals in people's brain paths, particularly for those who suffer from PTSD and other types of stress and anxiety, to help them reach those places that they've put away and in the back, and it helps them progress and allow them to live a more fruitful life. This is, we can say, groundbreaking, and I know it's very hesitant. I know there are a lot of people probably saying, man, Joe's gone off his rocker right now. But this is something that's been on the forefront for quite some time now that is actually starting to gain some mainstream attention.
And definitely the medical side of psilocybin mushrooms, as you mentioned, really has been very key when it comes to PTSD. And you're right, with the military troops, they've done a lot of trials and they've been very successful. And in many cases, this medical research, whether it be with mushrooms or with cannabis, it's still technically illegal in many instances. And that's a huge problem there, because there are a lot of medical patients that have used things like cannabis or mushrooms to ail their things. So there's a lot there. If I can speak to all the conservatives who might be very wary when it comes to legalization overall, would you rather have sort of free market reforms that allow competition, or would you rather have a more left-wing model where the government sells you cannabis or anything else, taxes are through the roof, no one's allowed to be an entrepreneur, no one can be a business? I think that's a better path to follow, and considering the Democratic majorities we're going to have in Washington, that's a big deal and something we need to push for.
All right, and on that note, let's talk about big tech. You and I, since our very first conversation here on the Big Talker, discussed and have followed the happenings of the digital world, and of course, you very well know my thoughts on how we've been sort of zombified by the social media platforms. Of course, there are values to it. You and I are conversating right now over a platform with no interruption, and you sound like you're in the room next to me, yet you're on the other side of the world. So one of the benefits, of course, to this digital age. But when you hear that there are 14 past executives or current executives from some of these major tech firms currently embedded with the incoming administration, does that not make you weary, given the fact that we've got one of the popular sites with conservatives, Parler, getting taken off the Apple platform? You've got the censorship of certain people. You've got kind of a double standard, as some people see it, as far as what goes and what doesn't on these platforms, which of course are private companies and have their own terms of service, and is very subjective based on what the Twitter gods and those behind the scenes say, and what they say goes. So I get that to an extent, but when we've got executives ponying up to a new administration, hearing calls from all sides of the aisle that we need to crack down on these companies, this doesn't seem like it's going to end well for the consumer and for that good old term that we use that helps promote capitalism, competition in our society.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of problems that come with the concentration of power, certainly when it comes to politicians and also with many tech firms. I mean, we need not really look for any other examples of the past 2 weeks. President Trump getting thrown off of all these platforms, even Pinterest. He can't put up bread recipes. He can't do his knitting. That's sad. I think for Parler, and look, I had an account on Parler. I didn't use it very much. I didn't really like the interface, to be quite honest. And it was a choice that I made to open an account there. And I use other decentralized services, and I think everyone should embrace that. I think it was a very bad business decision on Amazon's part because they hosted the website. I think that was a huge business failure, really. And that's something that should be punished in the marketplace. If people want to use decentralized servers and they don't want to use Amazon, they're very free to do so. I mean, I certainly don't use Amazon servers. I've got another company. I use other social media networks. And that's what we need is more competition, more decentralization. We can put a lot of our eggs in the basket of trying to sue Twitter, Facebook, and everything else. Look, they will make really big mistakes, and we should call them on it, and we should try to improve as best as possible. But we're also free to create alternatives. I mean, maybe a decade ago, Joe, we would have been talking about MySpace right now and how what they're doing is terrible and evil, and how dare they? And there's so many other companies that have come and gone that we've forgotten about. And I think in due time, many of these companies will be taken over. There will be competition. There'll be other things coming along. Back in the day, it was GeoCities and Yahoo that was taking over most of the net. So I think many people out there should not be concerned. Obviously, if many of your posts are being taken down, it's a perfect incentive to start your own server, start a Mastodon server. I started one here a couple weeks ago. I know you're on it, Joe, a couple other friends of the show, some other people. Look, we have it at our disposal if we want to break away from many of the companies, much of the centralization, and that's what's still so beautiful about our system. And that's something that hopefully we're going to keep trying to promote. It's never about promoting a company. It's always about promoting consumers and their choice. Because if you're not able to move your profile anywhere, that's where you have the real problem.
Well, with that said, I think there's just a information gap there. When you bring in language like using somebody's server and what that all entails and what that even means, I think many people just get lost in the sauce kind of look on their face when you start getting into the technical terms of what goes on behind the scenes, other than just going to your web browser and typing in a website through the search engine and it popping up and you just living your life. A lot of people just don't have the knowledge, and by no fault of their own in many cases, as to the way this works in the tech world.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the big platforms that are huge, Facebook, Twitter, and the like, they are big and have attracted so many users because they are simple and they're easy to use, and everyone knows someone who has one. So that's the kind of network benefits that exist. And, in due time, that'll continue to change. And for these other things, it doesn't have to be you creating your own server. Just latch on to someone who might know what they're talking about. I mean, I tried to do this in my life. There are people who are much more intelligent than me who can do things technologically. And, a lot of times I'll ask for their advice, or, they just set up something for me and I use it. And I think, we would be much better off if we did that, a lot of us, and continue to educate ourselves, guys. I mean, the internet has really created all of these platforms. It's something that has just sprawled out of nothing just over a couple of decades. I think we're all the better for it. We should continue to promote social networking and being online and sharing information no matter what. I mean, that's how this talk radio program is getting out around the world. You have people who are listening, people who are watching on the Facebook page or listening to the stream. I mean, that's the great thing about multimedia and all that different choice. I think there are a lot of gaps when it comes to technology and how we get to the next step, but that's on creators. They need to come up with better platforms that are easier to use. And the easier they are to use, the more people will turn away from the main ones that are probably letting down a lot of their users and consumers too.
You want to talk about real censorship at a time when more and more people cannot align with the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, and injecting politics into this conversation. And people are looking for something else. They're disenfranchised by the two major political parties. You want to talk about real censorship? Well, what about candidates that are involved with lesser known political affiliates and not getting an opportunity to have their voice heard, say, on a debate stage, or even getting their name put on the ballot because of all of these ridiculous requirements. That to me is censorship that we should all be calling into account when we look for alternatives to the D's and the R's in this game we play.
Wow, Joe, you're going from the monopoly to the duopoly of the political parties. I love it, and I know when I've guest hosted for you, I've interviewed Mike Munger, professor of economics at Duke University, who ran as a libertarian in North Carolina. He garnered over 4% of the vote back in 2008, and I think there are a lot of alternatives there. Parties in our country, it's kind of funny. Parties are very weak compared to other countries. In other countries, people have their card of their party and they carry it with them everywhere, and it defines everything about them. I think we still have very weak parties in the United States. People are much more attuned to their particular ideology, conservatism, liberalism, whatever it might be. So that actually gives a lot of opportunity to either change the parties, to introduce new ones. I mean, look, if we're the culture of consumer choice, we should apply that to politics as well. It shouldn't just stop right when we go to the voting booth. I think we can have a lot more competition there. There's a lot of competent people right here in Wilmington who I know would be great politicians, who would do a great job, whether it be in the state house or in D.C. I think we should encourage a lot more people there. We don't necessarily need to have people who've been in politics forever. That's kind of why our country was created. It's why we have a constitution. It's why we have citizen legislators. We need that knowledge, that local knowledge that people have from different industries to join up and to really help move this great American experiment.
Hey, let me ask you real quick. In talking about the big tech firms, major corporations, it seems those on the political left, they oftentimes are very critical of these one percenters and these billionaires who run these massive companies. Right now, they're awful silent on those evil corporations and the way they're running things, whether you agree or not. But it just seems like there's a little hypocrisy there, maybe a bit of a double standard in that are they really evil corporations, or is it just when it's expedient for you that we can make them evil and pit the rest of our base and society against those billionaires running the world?
Hypocrisy in politics. No, cannot be. Yeah, no, it's very convenient right now for many center left leaning folks. What's happening with many of the social media firms because it's not their accounts being blocked. In the past, it was. It was people like Julian Assange and WikiLeaks who at the time were viewed as very left wing. They were totally canceled by Visa, MasterCard, Amazon, all the same. And at that time, many on the left were decrying what was happening. Now that it's happening to Trump and many people who like him, silent, as you say. And that's very telling. And that's why it's important to have principled people who might be governing things or might be there in the chairs of power. That is very unfortunate. I really do hate this whataboutism that comes on. I think there's every reason in the world to detest what's happening, no matter who it's happening to. And I think that's an important principle that all of us should recognize. Everyone wants to score some cheap political points, no doubt, for the moment. But man, especially when it comes to online freedom and internet freedom, considering how much business we do, how much we interact with our friends and family, they're playing a really dangerous game on both sides.
Yael, as I let you go with the Consumer Choice Center, what a well-rounded conversation we're having here this morning. We started the discussion off with the legalization of cannabis and the research and studies being done surrounding the use of LSD and psychedelics, ketamine as a way to help in the mental health world. And now we're going to go to sports gambling here. Nothing better than betting and drugs to get you going here on a Thursday morning. We're towards the back end of the weekend, so all the vices are starting to bubble up in my psyche here today, Yael, and you're bringing them out. I've got friends up in the Northeast that live in New York. They have to drive across a bridge and a river into the state of New Jersey to legally place bets through various websites because sports gambling is legal in a state like New Jersey, but illegal in New York. Literally, they pop up their phone, and with their location, it shows they're in New Jersey. They can then access an app and place a wager on a game or whatever, and then drive back and see how it shakes out. Seems a little ridiculous, and I'm not saying that these aren't things that need to be used in moderation. And you should, if you need help, you should call the Gamblers Anonymous Network. But once again, you're advocating for free and consumer choice, and leave it up to the people to be able to tell right from wrong and have a little moderation in their lives. Less government is what the Consumer Choice Center is all about. More choice.
And definitely, we had the Supreme Court. They came down and said, this was 3 years ago, that states could not restrict online sports gambling and betting. And I was reminded of this when I was just with a friend watching a football game. I was watching the Colts and thought I'd get in on some of the action because I kind of knew it's the only game I understand that plays in Europe. And thought I'd throw a bet and found out I couldn't. I couldn't use any of my addresses. I couldn't because of my location. Not legal in Florida, not legal in North Carolina, only New Jersey, sometimes Colorado, depending on the website. So it was impossible. The only way to do it, if you're an American citizen anywhere, is to use some site in the Bahamas or somewhere else where it's outside the U.S. legal system. That's pretty ridiculous. We're in the 21st century. People are gambling all the time when they go to Vegas. People are gambling in New Jersey. If it's so bad that only people in New Jersey can do it, something there, Joe, is a bit strange. So I hope we can focus in the various states. I know New York is thinking about it. Hopefully North Carolina does too. Let people bet, let people gamble, let people do what they do in many other states. I think that's a very good measure for consumer choice.
Probably better off putting your credit card there or your debit card involved rather than having some guy Vito coming by with a baseball bat to collect in case you owe something, right? I mean, wouldn't
This is
that be
true.
the way in which we can mitigate some of that other stuff that goes on in the black market when the collector comes looking for that white envelope?
Yeah, we don't want no loan sharks. Make it legal. It's the same as the earlier part of the conversation. Put it in the legal market. Put some regulations. Everyone knows what's going on. Be transparent. That's consumer choice all the way, baby.
Yaël Ossowski in the Consumer Choice Center, the global grassroots movement for consumer choice. You can listen into Yael and Dave Clement on the Consumer Choice Radio Show. It airs on Saturdays at 10 a.m. right here on the Big Talker FM. Yael, thanks for adjusting your schedule this week. We'll get back to regular programming on Friday at 9:30 in the week ahead.
Thank you so much, Joe. All the best.